Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lesson 16 in this Chess Beginner to Winner series, in which we help you progress from absolute beginner to winning your first chess tournaments and beyond. And so today, in this lesson, we will talk about the power of decoys and deflections. And the way I'm going to do that today is play through two games by Adolf Anderssen. And for those beginners that have never heard of him, he was born in Germany in 1818, and he played throughout the middle 1800s and was considered, after winning a tournament in London in 1851, he was kind of considered the unofficial world champion and also one of the greatest combinational players of all time. He was a heavy tactical player, liked to attack and use daring attacking schemes and tactics to go after his opponent. So he was considered the best player in the world up until about 1858 when he was defeated by Paul Morphy. And then Paul Morphy, he only played a short while in chess, a few years, and he kind of just quit chess. So then Wilhelm Steinitz, the first official world chess champion, had to pretty much defeat Adolf Anderssen to be considered the best in the world, which he did maybe in the 1870s, I believe, because Anderssen, he kept playing up until about the 1870s, and around that time he died. And so Wilhelm Steinitz went on to become the official world chess champion in 1886. All right, before I just dig too much into all that history, this first game we're going to take a look at is Adolf Anderssen's Immortal game. So you're in for a treat here today. If you haven't ever seen this game before, it was played in 1851, and it was a friendly game. So both sides probably took more risk. They took more risks because it wasn't, a tournament game, and so it didn't matter as much. It was just for fun. All right, so here we go. Anderssen had the white pieces, and he was playing Kaiseritsky, and his opponent responded with e5. So e4, e5, and now Anderssen plays f4, the king's gambit. So as I mentioned in past lessons, a gambit is pretty much where you give up a pawn, or give up some material in exchange for some other advantage. So it looks like his opponent accepts the gambit and captures here on f4. So what that does is pull this valuable pawn that was on e5 off to the side. And now it could allow Anderssen to move his other pawn up here immediately and have both pawns in the center to control the center. But instead, he chooses to develop a piece here. Bishop to c4, aiming at this vulnerable f7 square and this pawn right here. So now we have a queen developing early, and normally you don't want to do that because the queen can become a target, as we'll see in this game. So the king is in check here, and whenever your king's in check, you must either capture the attacker, which cannot be done here, block, which could be done, but then this pawn would just capture here if the g-pawn pushed forward. So your third and final option is to run. So the king runs to f1, and now we have kind of a counter gambit here where Anderssen's opponent offers up a pawn over here to pull this bishop off this attacking line aimed at his king. And so Anderssen captures the pawn and takes that offered material of a pawn, and his opponent develops the knight here. And so now this pawn is under attack, but Anderssen ignores that for the moment and targets the queen, so threatening to capture the queen. The queen retreats to protect this pawn, but now Anderssen moves forward and protects his pawn, which was under attack by the knight, and also releases the line for this bishop, aiming at the pawn and also the queen up here. So let me go to the analysis here, and we can actually take a look at what the computer is thinking here. So the computer did not really like that move as much. It preferred just an immediate d4. So jumping this pawn all the way up here and even offering up this pawn, because then this knight could become the target of an attack and it would be pinned to the king. So the computer preferred that d4 move, but this is maybe a little more solid, just protecting this pawn. So now it looks like Anderssen's opponent moves a piece twice in the opening, and so the computer does not like that. He sends this knight over here to the edge of the board, which is also usually bad. But his idea here is to jump down to g3 and attack this rook and check the king. And the pawn would not be able to capture, or else the queen would capture the rook. So in order to block the attack of that queen down towards the rook, Anderssen moves his knight twice in the opening. So there are exceptions to the rules, and the computer didn't really like that either. Let's see, it preferred just rook to g1 here, just moving the rook over. So now we have two knights on the edge of the board here. So now the queen jumps forward and attacks this unprotected knight. So the knight jumps up, moving forward here, and moves into, oh, actually, let me go back here. Also, this queen is forking. So just remember, tactics, learning tactics as much as you can, especially if you're a beginner, will definitely help you improve. And so that's why I wanted to go over the decoys and deflections, which we'll get to here shortly. But right now, the queen is forking the bishop and the knight here. So the knight jumps up here, blocking that. Let me see if the computer preferred anything different. No, it says that's the best move, which, I don't know. Now it even looks like maybe a possibility of attacking the knight. But and that's what the computer says is the best move and the only move that would keep black in the lead. Attack the knight with the g-pawn. And then if that knight tries to move away, well then, maybe it could move here and defend the bishop, but then the other pawn could possibly come down and attack. All right. In the game, we have this move here, c6, attacking the bishop, trying to drive that bishop away, and the computer didn't like that move as much. So Anderssen ignores that, just ignores the attack on the bishop and counterattacks this knight over here. So we have the knight retreating, and also one thing to notice, we have this pin on this pawn here. So as this pawn jumps forward, en passant capture is possible with this pawn, but then the bishop would be able to capture the queen. So black would not want to do that. So the knight's under attack and the knight retreats, and now we have the queen and the knight piling up on this pawn. The bishop is under attack. Now the rook lines up on the queen, helping to protect this pawn. Kaiseritsky just captures this material over here. And so he's ahead, +3, by a whole bishop now. So Anderssen charges forward, attacking the queen, trying to trap this queen in the corner. So the queen has to retreat. The pawn pushes forward, attacking again. And now we see, even though Anderssen is behind in material, a whole bishop here, the computer evaluation says he's ahead. So the queen jumps forward, and this queen is running out of room here. So now the queen, Anderssen's queen, moves up here to prepare an attack on this pawn with the bishop and attacking the queen. So the knight moves out of the way, and the computer does not like that move. It said that, let's see here, it looks like just bishop to b7 is preferred. So interesting. Bishop to b7 is what the computer says is best. Looks like, well, we can take a look at that real quick because it is interesting. An attack, pinning this pawn to the queen. So then it says next would be, let's see, bishop captures, attacking the queen. But now, let's see, knight capturing on g4. So this is interesting stuff here. And now either capture this knight or just capture the queen. So we'll take a look at that. If the queen is captured, well now, oh, okay, we have the fork here. So interesting tactics going on here. All right, before we dive off too deep into that variation, we'll take a look at this. So the queen moves up here, preparing an attack on the queen. The knight retreats to allow an escape path for the queen. So the bishop attacks, the queen retreats, and Anderssen, seeing that the queen, having moved here, was lined up on this pawn and the rook, he blocks with the knight. So now we have this bishop developing and attacking the other rook. And it looks like the computer does not like that move either. He prefers, let's see here, queen to c6, kind of lining up on the opponent's queen. All right, so now the bishop is attacking, but we have an interesting move here. So finally we can get down to decoys and deflections. A decoy would be when you lure an opponent onto a square or onto a particular line. And a deflection is when you deflect them away from a square or a particular line. So they're closely linked. They're pretty similar. But this is kind of a decoy here where this queen is under attack, but it's being decoyed down to this pawn to capture here, which, of course, that's what Kaiseritsky does. And now he's attacking this rook. And so what does Anderssen do? Well, the computer says he makes a blunder here, but by moving this bishop up here, and let's go back and see what the computer recommends. The computer, of course, just recommends moving this rook away here to e1 and lining up on the king. But the game wouldn't be as exciting if normal play occurred. So now we have this blunder move, attacking the bishop here, kind of cutting off an escape square on the opponent's king, and just enticing this queen to jump over here and capture this rook, and more decoy tactics here. So first, we have this bishop capturing the more valuable rook down here. So this bishop has been decoyed away. And, or, is it a decoy or a deflection? Because this bishop was guarding this line, so it was kind of deflected away from this line, but also decoyed away from the line. So we got the bishop to move away from this important diagonal here, and now this bishop controls this diagonal up towards the king. So what does Anderssen do now? He plays another move that the computer does not like at all. So it looks like, once again, rook to e1, saving the rook. But with this move, we further try to decoy this queen away down here, and even entice it to attack the king with check, and then the king would have to run. But this is an important move because it kind of blocks out the path of the bishop up here, and can allow the knight to capture on g7 with a check. It just kind of blocks the scope of the queen. All right, so the queen captures with check, the king runs away, and now we have this move, a blunder leading to a mate in 3 by Kaiseritsky. So let's take a quick look. The computer says that he should have played bishop to a6, and the game would have gone on longer. But what would be the fun in that? So here we go. Knight delivering check, and now that's possible because of this pawn that blocks the path of the queen that cannot capture that knight now. So the king must run. He runs over here to the d8 square, and now we have another very interesting move, a brilliant move, a queen sacrifice. So now we're going to deflect, or decoy this knight away. We're going to pull it away from this square, and decoy it over here to capture this queen, and that will prevent the knight from covering this important e7 square. So black has no choice here. He has to do something. He either has to capture, or block the attacker or capture. So he goes after the queen, but that leads to mate with this bishop here on e7, just trapping the king. So very interesting use of decoying and deflecting, kind of. So decoys and deflections are pretty close. Remember, decoying is where you lure a piece onto a line or square, and a deflection is where you kind of deflect them away from a square or a line. So they're pretty similar. All right. So if you thought this was an interesting game, remember that this was a friendly game. So both sides were not, probably not playing moves that they might normally play in a tournament game, especially Anderssen just giving up all kinds of material. So we'll take a look at one more Anderssen game, and this one is from the London 1851 tournament, I believe. Let me pull it up. All right. Okay, so this one, let's see. Okay. No, it looks like this was a tournament in Germany in 1869. And it was between Anderssen once again with the white pieces playing Johannes Zukertort, also a great player from that time period. Okay, so let's check this game out. And remember, this is a more serious tournament game. If we look at the analysis, let's see, do a game review. And I should have showed you this game review in the last game. It was like 70 something, around 80 and 70% in the last game. And here we see Anderssen plays at a 96.8 accuracy percentage versus 81.3 by his opponent. So Anderssen is playing a lot more solid chess here. And we see that the game is steadily even until Anderssen just takes a big leap, gathers a huge advantage here in the end. And we'll see how he did that. All right, so let's take a look here. E4, E5, knight to F3, and knight to C6 by Zukertort. So bishop to C4, the Italian game by Anderssen. And response is bishop to c5, the Giocco piano, which I believe is the quiet game. And so now Anderssen refuses to play a quiet game, and he plays the Evans Gambit variation of the Italian game or the Giocco piano game. So here, b4 is played to lure this bishop down here to b4. So the bishop accepts the gambit, and now we'll see why this pawn was gambited in this way. So now c3 can be played, driving this bishop back, and the c pawn can help fortify a d4 pawn push as well. So the bishop retreats back this way, and now we have the d4 move. So when your opponent has two central pawns like this, if you can, it's usually a good idea to try and knock that out. So Zukertort attacks and captures that d4 pawn, and now normally the c pawn would want to capture here, but it cannot because of this pin on the king. So remember, pins can be very powerful and influence a lot when it comes to different tactics in a game. All right, so capturing, getting out of that pin, and now the bishop retreats to b6. And it says that that's an inaccuracy, that an immediate knight to f6 would have been better. And so even with bishop to b6, black is slightly in the lead. But now this allows the capture here, and now white has the two strong central pawns. And maybe if that knight were here, it could have tried to capture this one, although that might not be recommended, because then the knight could be pinned to the king, since the king is stuck out in the open here. All right, so d6, the best move, making room for this bishop to develop, and Anderssen presses forward, attacking the knight. The knight attacks the bishop, and very interesting, this bishop is left under attack here. So why did why did Anderssen leave this bishop able to be captured by Zukertort? Well, because he counterattacked by moving this bishop to b2, lining up on this g7 pawn, and threatening to go after this rook. So if the knight would capture, then we'd have capture of the pawn and then the rook. So the knight moves out of the way here, and now this bishop is retreated, so it cannot be captured. And we're also looking at a knight that's just stuck on the edge of the board here. So a knight on the rim is dim in this position. He can't even jump back to here or here because of the pawn and the bishop. So now we have castling, which is best, and the game is about even. So development by Anderssen, and now also kind of repositioning this knight, which will allow development of the queen down this line possibly. And also this bishop needs to be developed. It looks like the computer preferred just pushing this pawn. So now Anderssen does likewise. He repositions his knight here, possibly to prevent this knight from coming forward and attacking the bishop here. All right, so now we have a pawn thrust on the queen side, but the computer prefers a bishop moving in here and attacking. But in the game, after this pawn move, the queen moves forward, and it looks like the computer preferred just an attack on the knight with the bishop to c3. But after queen to d2, the game, it says this was an inaccuracy, and the game has kind of swung back slightly in black's favor. Continuing on, we have f6, probably trying to blunt the line of this bishop here, especially if the queen is thinking about moving here to c3 and threatening a mate up here on g7. But now this pawn is blocking that diagonal. But the computer does not like that. It says now the game is slightly in white's favor. And instead it preferred bishop to c7. All right, so now we have the king moving into the corner. Interesting move. The computer says this is an inaccuracy, and that rook at a to b1 would have been better. All right. Finally, the bishop moves back to c7, and the computer says that is best, and the game has swung in favor of black now. And we have rook at a to c1, kind of taking control of this half-open diagonal, and also to prevent this pawn from pushing forward and attacking the bishop. So now we have rook to b8, also the best move, perhaps preparing a b-pawn push here, where the bishop would be able to capture that pawn, but now the rook is protecting. Okay, moving on. Knight develops, pawn pushes forward, knight repositions up here towards the king side, and now we move forward. The pawn moves forward, gaining space on the queen side, but this rook moves to g1, lining up on the king here, even though there's material in between. Who knows what could happen further on along in the game. So this bishop repositions, but the computer doesn't like that. It looks like just knight to e5 would have been better. And now g4, a pawn thrust towards the king, making room for the rooks. But in response, black finally moves this knight to e5, the best move here, attacking the bishop and the knight. So here, interesting choice. This bishop is given up here. This good bishop captures, getting rid of that knight, and then after a recapture, and also interesting, usually you want to capture towards the center, but Zukertort chose not to do that, and now Anderssen has a passed pawn here. And the rook moves up, and from here it could reposition to here, and maybe get some pressure up the h-file there. So we have rook to f7. The pawn moves forward, trying to break open the king side, and bishop capture here. So after recapture, now the queen can capture this pawn, and we have another pawn capture, and this interesting choice here. So of course the pawn cannot capture because it's pinned. The rook could have captured, but instead we have this rook moving over, lining up with the queen, threatening to capture the bishop here. So that is ignored, and we have a doubling of the rooks on the G file here, trying to pile up on this pinned pawn. And so the king just slides over here to get out of the line of fire of these doubled rooks. And now we have capture with check. The king has to move back, and the queen joins in the attack. So now Zukertort retreats his queen back to attack this queen here. But the queen is sacrificed. A brilliant move. Okay, finally, we get to some decoys and deflections here. So, capturing here decoys the king onto this h7 square, where now a rook could move over there, but if the rook were to move immediately like this, well, it looks like the queen would slow things down here with queen to h6 blocking. And of course, the king could not retreat immediately, or it would be rook to h8 mate. But either way, it looks like mate is happening here. So let's go back and take a look what actually happened. So we have this move, f6, blocking the path of the queen with a discovered check at the same time. So the king must move here. Also, another option, let me take a look here. I guess if the queen captured, it would have been an even faster mate, because this rook is still jumping over here and then moving up for mate. So the king retreats. Now we have another decoy, sending the bishop in there this time. So the king is forced to capture once again, but this time the rook can move over to h3, not worrying about the queen blocking. The king has to run, but it is mate. So that was a little taste of how decoys and deflections can work. They're similar and maybe kind of opposite. So just remember, a decoy pulls a piece onto a line or square, and a deflection deflects them or pulls them off of a line or a square. So just remember, if you're having problems trying to build up an attack and there's one piece that is just giving you a problem, sometimes you can deflect that piece away, or if you're going after the king in this case, you can just move your pieces up there. We'll take a look at this. So first, the queen pulls this king, decoys the king onto this H file here, allowing the rook or the bishop to attack. So first, the pawn moves attacking here, but the king runs, and now the bishop decoys, pulling the king back to the H file, allowing the rook to deliver a check, and then checkmate. All right, well, this video is going on quite a bit here. I hope you enjoyed these two interesting games. The first game is known as Anderssen's Immortal game. one of his most interesting and most famous games of all time. And he has another interesting game called the Evergreen game, which maybe I'll show in a future video, or you can go search that Evergreen game by Anderssen online. It's another very interesting game. And so if you enjoy attacking and tactics, I would recommend taking a look at more of Adolf Anderssen's games from the mid 1800s, and also they're a little bit easier to understand compared to today's complex computer researched games. If you want to improve your tactics, just take a look at more Anderssen games, and I'll try and discuss tactics more. I will probably choose random tactical themes that will help you in your own games. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions. And also, if you have any requests on something you would like to see, just let me know and I'll try and get to that when I can. All right, everybody. Have a great day, and I will see you the next time. Thank you all for watching.